Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hypertrophy Odyssey. It is the second day of the week, aka the Special Beam Cannon workout. I'm feeling very good right now. To the main subject matter for today, psychos. So, the main reason why I want to discuss this, and when I talk about psychos, I'm going to kind of broaden it a little bit, but psychos is a continuation of the previous episode. It's a trio of sorts where you're going to be looking at the trio of people in the world, and I think that this is what would be considered the evil side of a lot of stuff. So, the psychos. So, in today's episode, we're going to be looking at that, and I'm going to use before we get really into it, I would like to say that the term psycho in this case represents a person, a particular, I wouldn't say group, but just a group of people that I would say are a part of that. Now, just say that they're all psychotic. No, they are probably normal people in society in a certain sense, but they have tendencies that will make it so they do act psychotic towards their regular, everyday, normal normie and are very persuasive in certain ways. So, in today's episode, we're going to be looking at the psycho and how pertinent they are in modern culture and how they are, for some reason, everywhere. No matter how hard you try, they exist everywhere. And how they really do personify the evils out there in the world and really only care for themselves, really. And maybe other psychos. But then there are other psychos that don't give a fuck about anyone or anything. So today we're going to be looking at that group because there is an interexchange between the three groups that we're going to be talking about, which will probably be the fourth episode now about this, because this is something that I feel like very much explains a lot of how the world works. And it's very weird because I didn't think of it like this, but it really does explain a lot of the stuff and the inner workings between one and the other. You can think of it like the spectrum. This is we're now looking at the left side of the spectrum, the evil side, if you will. With that being said, we are going to be talking about that and a few other things when we get to Mother Base.
All right, so started this day off with squats, which are pretty good. But anyways, back to the main subject matter at hand here for today. Psychos. So the main reason why I want to discuss this is because, like I said before, this goes into a trio of types of people. Not necessarily archetypes, but how I see the world really. And one of the things about this is that psychos is probably what would be considered the more evil side of things. Not necessarily all psychos are evil, but more so along the lines of if you are a psycho, you're more likely to commit acts of evil relatively easily. I think that most people understand who these people are. These are your serial killers, your sociopaths, your people that you know in your life that care about nothing but themselves, that type of people. And I'm not to say that these people aren't necessarily all encompassing evil, but usually they will do whatever they have to or feel like is needed to in order to better their standing in life. But usually that means using people and controlling them and making sure that they are useful until they are not useful and then they are disposed of. I think a lot of people know these types of people. It's not hard to find someone like this. You really hope to God that you don't encounter or know or are friends with or are in a relationship with someone like this, because it is very often where these people will drag others down and or use them to propel themselves to a different level of the world. And I think that that's the biggest thing about them, is that the psycho, the person that does not care about the other brethren, the other self, is the person that you have to be very aware of, very cautious of, because they're not necessarily they aren't doing things so brazenly and brashly. Most of the time it is very undercover, really, and behind the scenes, because they don't want to be caught. The people that you consider a shapeshifter, a snake, if you will. Having to deal with these types of people in the world is the toughest part, because they are all encompassing and they like to group together because they are like-minded, as they will see the world as nothing but their plaything. And I think that that's the biggest thing, the worry, the fear, or the making sure that you're not this, you know. And obviously you might have some characteristics of this, because intertwined through everything is the fact that most people are in one of the three groups will also have shared characteristics. It's the things that can allow us to become more centralized during certain ideas. You know, it's what allows us to be guidanced by laws and things like that. The people who go against these things are more on the outer fringes. But the psycho itself is someone who just has disregard usually for things and or people or even themselves, as they are willing to burn anything alive around them, in front of them, or even themselves in order for whatever thing that they want to achieve in this world, whatever that may be, and whatever dark or ritualistic type of thing that is. I think that they're very few and far between. If we look at actual legitimate psychos out there in the world, world, there aren't that many. There are much more normies. But a lot of the time, there are people out there that have psycho-like tendencies, and then they will do things, but then they won't take it to the furthest extreme where they are destroying lives, which I think happens a lot more often than people like to think. Sure, they might encounter somebody that has psycho-like tendencies, but I don't think they encounter somebody that has true, unadulterated malevolence in their body and soul. I think most people who encounter those types of people usually don't encounter them for long because they're probably dead or moved on to a different place because they have been used, abused, and hopefully have left. And I think that this isn't necessarily just a gender thing as well, because I know that some people will just think of men as psychos, but women can also be that, as this isn't something that is just to one characteristic of a gender, but more so just the all-encompassing idea of these people being very terrible to be around. And it's a cautious thing. And I think that the main thing to do in order to find out if somebody is a psycho around you is to see how they interact with not only themselves, but other people that have less than them, people that have more than them, how they treat strangers, how they treat the people around them. All of these things all go in together. Obviously, you're not going to be able to sniff out every psycho all at once, but there are some characteristics that would probably be able to deem it or sniff it out. That's the one thing about the psycho that has been so prevalent, is that they have gotten into many positions of power and or influence where they have numbed the senses of what would make a psycho viable or like detectable by others and made it so it's numbed those senses. It's why something like the female intuition has gone away by the wayside. It doesn't exist anymore like it once did, which I will get to in a different episode, but that is something that has been nullified because a lot of them who are psychos have gotten to that point where they can quantifiably propagandize people into believing that there are certain things that should not be seen as psycho-like activities or characteristics of a psycho, whether it be physical or metaphysical, and have shooed them into becoming a more of a normalized thing, and thus making it so that they can blend in easier. You know, the type, like I've said earlier, the people who have psycho-like tendencies but aren't necessarily there blend in well with those who do normal-like tendencies but truly are psychos who do not give a fuck about the people and instead will enslave them and do whatever they want with them in mentally, physically, and emotionally, of course. And to them, they are just their plaything, like I said before. I think that that is the biggest hurdle of it all, is the numbing of these, what would be sixth senses that we've probably all lost because of how much stuff we have consumed and how much they have grown influence upon the world, that now these types of things are so hard to actually discern and make sure that we are safe from that. That's why there's such a vast level of distrust in the world, because I think that everybody across the board has gotten so desensitized to these types of things that now that you can't really necessarily tell if who you are talking to or who you are with is a psycho until it's too late and they've used and abused you and used you to whatever gain that they've wanted, whether it be just for fun or for something worse than that.
And we're back. Welcome to the workout debriefing. Exercises not filmed, none. Exercises skipped, also none. Got everything in, thankfully. But anyways, back to the main subject matter for today. Psychos. So the main reason I want to discuss psychos in the first place is because this is partly an issue that most people have to deal with. I think we all kind of know a psycho here and there, and there isn't necessarily a formula to them. Necessarily, they aren't always the worst people in the world. Maybe they are making your particular life hell. But they could also be people that are misconstrued or misknown. But generally speaking, when I talked about psychos in this case or in this context, it's usually people that are trying to actively make your life and or others' lives particularly worse for their own benefit most of the time, but also sometimes just for the hell of it. Those are the people that you have to be aware of because they're all around the place. Now, out of like 100, you might beat like 90 normies, 5 psychos, and 5 of the next group, which we will get to. And I think that those 5 can be so influential on the rest of the 90 that you have to be very careful about those types of people because of the fact that the normie is so malleable that the people who are psychos can and will and have taken advantage of the normie complex and thus made it so that these people who should be regular ass people or just living their life occasionally doing some terrible things are pulled and lulled into doing worse things than they probably should be and being led by these psychos who somehow have the charisma and such to allow them to do such a thing. You know, if you would like a biblical example of this, the devil is very convincing to people in and wanting to follow him, you know, and that entire thing. It's a very interesting dynamic when you look at the two, because when it comes to psychos, I think it's an innate thing that we kind of understand. Whenever you see it, you understand it like, oh, this person is genuinely evil and out to get me, or they are actually terrible for me as a person. I just want to live my life. But some people are hooded away from these types of people. They are hoodwinked by these types of people who they can't see past the idea of what they are doing is psychotic and also just manipulative, or they understand it but for some reason will allow themselves to be manipulated, like almost like as if they're in a Stockholm syndrome-esque. And it's a very terrible situation when that does happen, because I feel like a lot of the times that's exactly what happens, specifically in society, where people get lulled into sleep by these psychos in order to do whatever they want with them, basically lull them into a state of nothing and then allow them to continuously rape the people with whatever they want to do with them. And it's a very terrible thing to see specifically happen, because you can tell when people have been basically taken advantage of by these psychos and are basically the minions of these people. It's one of those things where there's not much, there are things you can do, but at a certain point the psycho is just so fucking convincing every once in a while where there is no fighting back. They have won that battle, and thus you have to kind of let go of the person, the normie that they ended up getting and converting to whatever other bullshit that they're trying to get into. So if you look at it, we look at the spectrum of things. So this is on the left side, the evil side, if you will. They will occasionally do things that might be good in a certain sense, but realistically they're psychos, so they don't want to do anything good for the world. They want to destroy and or make it all for themselves and leave the rest ruin and rubble, because they have extracted everything that they can out of it. Think of them like a parasite almost. They're self-helping. They will help other psychos, but also as well, they will destroy them as well, because of course they're psychos. It doesn't matter. With that being said, tell me what you think in the comment section down below. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions about this one. And if you have any stories or anything or anybody who might be a psycho in your own life, because I feel like they pop up every once in a while. So please like, comment, and subscribe. Please share this video with anybody who may or may not like it. I will be back on tomorrow with a new video. Thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Keep it happy, stay safe out there, stay warm, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.